coming near to the end of our time, so I just have a few more questions for you. It's our understanding that after the Emergencies Act was invoked, you were one of the people who had their bank accounts frozen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell the commission what that meant for you and what that was like?
Well, my bank accounts were frozen, I believe, on the day I was arrested on the February 17th. My corporate accounts as well as my joint accounts were frozen for the weekend, unfrozen, I believe, the Monday. My Toronto Dominion bank account was frozen for upwards of 3.5 months.
And how did that impact you?
I learned how to use cash again.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barber. I'm going to be asking you questions via Zoom. My name is Eva Krajewska, and I'm counsel to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association.
Pleased to meet you.
My questions are going to focus on the impact of the orders freezing the bank accounts. So I understand from your earlier evidence that your bank accounts were frozen during the course of or after the protest. Is that fair?
Yes, they were.
And can you just please specify for me, was it your personal account that was frozen?
So I've got 3 major accounts that were frozen. One was the corporate account. The other one was a joint bank account with my lovely wife. And the third was Toronto Dominion personal bank account. The personal bank account with Toronto Dominion was closed for roughly 3.5 months. I had no access to funds. The other 2 bank accounts were, they were closed for the weekend. A couple payments went back. I had one NSF charge, I believe, and the fuel cards got shut off for my drivers, so they weren't very happy.
Okay, and so let me just break that down. The fuel cards for your drivers, are those business credit cards?
In my line of business with the trucking company, we run card lock cards with different fuel distributors, and I have agreements with those fuel companies to withdraw payments automatically out of my accounts every Sunday. So I'm up on current on my fuel bills.
And are those linked to your corporate account then?
Yes, they are.
And so when your corporate account was frozen, then the fuel cards were also inoperative?
Yes.
And you said that they were frozen on the Sunday. So is that, would that be the Sunday, the 20th of February?
20th. They would have been frozen on the 17th, I believe.
Okay.
My bank manager at CIBC explained to me that they were reopened on Monday. She wouldn't give me details. She'd explained to me that she'd got an email from RCMP saying it was an illegal freeze or something, and that they were reopened right away. But Toronto Dominion was a different story. Toronto Dominion was closed without any excuse. I tried desperately to get a hold of somebody from Toronto Dominion to explain to me why my accounts were frozen, and I yet to receive an explanation.
And so with respect to when your accounts were they frozen before or after you were arrested?
I believe they were frozen on the day of. I wasn't really using a debit card. All the stores were closed downtown. So I believe the 17th is when they were frozen.
Right. And you were informed that they were frozen with respect to your corporate account, your CIBC corporate account. It was someone at CIBC who informed you that they were frozen?
I believe so. I don't think I knew that the corporate account was frozen until I didn't have a cell phone, so I couldn't check balances or anything until I got back home, I believe.
So it was only after the fact when you came home that you learned that it had been frozen by,
Yes.
by a letter from CIBC or by a telephone call?
That I can't recall. I don't remember if I got much correspondence. I'm personal friends with my banker at CIBC, so she may have sent me a text message. I didn't have a phone, so I can't recall.
And in your TD bank account, how did you learn, the personal one, how did you learn that that was frozen?
The debit card wouldn't work.
And you said that you tried to obtain information from TD as to why it was frozen and why it took so long to reopen?
Yes.
And you did not get, did you get a satisfactory answer?
No, I didn't. I was given a phone number and a first name, and when I called that number, I was just a short answer. I believe I spoke with them He called me back once. I kind of made it a point to call him every week to question him on why. And I never did get an answer back.
And was the first name and phone number that you received, it was someone from the TD Bank?
It was, yeah, somebody in Ontario, I believe. His name
And
is
did you
Jay.
ever receive any correspondence from the RCMP or the OPS with respect to the freezing of your bank accounts?
I did not, no.
And can you speak to me first about the impact of the freezing of your corporate bank account? What impact did it have on your business? You mentioned the cancellation of the fuel cards. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, cancellation on my fuel cards. So I had to remake the payment. The fuel cards were shut off because of the lack of payment. There was an NSF charge. One that happened down the road a little ways, I applied for a loan and was going to put a significant amount of cash down, like money down on the loan for a deposit. And I was rejected from my financing company because of the account being frozen, apparently. I don't know. They wouldn't really explain. They just said I was declined the loan. And I have a perfect credit rating. I have never been in trouble with credit. It's been years since I've been in trouble with a credit rating. 20 some plus years, I would say. So I stand good with the banks. That was a little tough to do.
Sorry, sir. With respect to the fuel cards, for how long were your drivers not able to use the fuel cards to supply the vehicles?
I would imagine it was a matter of a day or two. I was into the bank right away. I was home, so I was able to get into the bank and make the payment right away. And fuel companies are good, but they get pretty nervous when a payment gets returned.
I'm sure everybody does. And sir, with respect to your personal bank account, you said that, how did that impact? Can you provide a little bit more elaboration on how it impacted you? You said that you had to use cash. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that, or how it impacted you to have your personal bank account frozen?
It changes everything you do. You don't realize how much you use the debit card in your pocket, I guess. I went back to, as any Canadian, apparently you keep a small stash of cash for emergencies, and that got used. I had to go back to cash for the time being.
Thank you, sir. Those are all my questions.
Appreciate it.
Ms. Krajewska from the CCLA was asking you about bank accounts that were being frozen, and as I understood the TD account you spoke about, you said it had been frozen for 3.5 months?
Yes, sir.
Do you know why it was frozen for that long?
To this day, I still don't know. I would imagine it had something to do. Ms. Litch added my name to her Toronto Dominion Bank, where the GoFundMe funds went into for the GoFundMe, the 1 million, and then the e-transfer. For transparency, she added myself to her bank account, so everything was out in the open. There was two sets of eyes looking at it. The biggest worry for her was that somebody would accuse her of misusing funds, which wasn't the case.
So the TD bank account you're referring to, that was an account that originally was opened by Ms. Leach?
I had a personal Toronto Dominion, so all she did was merge the two savings accounts, so I could physically see her savings account on my card. That's the only thing that I assume had to do with why my bank account was frozen for 3.5 months.
So you had a pre-existing TD account,
Yes, sir.
and then Ms. Leach added you to the account that she had created for the purposes of getting the GoFundMe funds?
Yeah, for the purposes of transparency, so that there was more eyes on that account than just hers.
Was your bank account frozen?
Yes, sir.
For how, tell me about that. What happened?
I understood the government officials stated that they had notified organizers their bank accounts would be frozen. My husband notified me my bank account and his bank account and our business bank account were frozen. And at 10:04 on the 17th is when I received a phone call from a person stating they were from the Royal Bank and that they had frozen my accounts. They had a very nasty exchange with me because they had no right to do so. I told them to open the accounts. They told me to call them when I left Ottawa, and I said, you need to open my accounts. We ended the exchange. I realized other people in the room were also getting that same phone call. Whether it was the same person making the phone call, I do not know, but I do know other people in the room were getting the same phone call.
And so what happened after that?
I had no money.
And what did you do?
I had to ask for money or let people know that I didn't have any money. And I was lucky enough that two gentlemen on the street actually understood my truck payment was coming due, and I was a few $100s short. I think it was $6 something I was short. They together collectively sent me enough money to cover my truck payment. A woman by the name of Miss Zena was kind enough to give me $100, which helped because it put gas in my car, in my pickup truck to go. And from then we had to scramble on how we were going to pay for medication for my husband and how we were going to pay the mortgage.
And so this was while you were still in the, excuse me, the Ottawa area?
Yes.
And at some point were your accounts unfrozen?
Yes.
And when was that?
You'd have to ask my husband. He takes care of that.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm going to be asking my questions via Zoom. Can you see me?
I can.
Perfect. My name is Eva Krajewska, and I'm counsel to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. And I just have a few questions with respect to the freezing of your bank accounts. I know you already spoke about this in the examination conducted by Commission Counsel. And I understand from that evidence that you learned from a phone call you received from RBC that your bank accounts were frozen on February 17th.
That's correct, but it wasn't from RBC. It was actually from a police officer.
Oh, okay, I see. So the telephone call that you received on that day was from a police officer that your bank accounts were frozen?
Yes, when I called it at a later date, it's a police officer.
And do you know whether that police officer was a police officer of the Ottawa Police Service, the RCMP, or the OPP?
I believe he was Toronto service or from the Toronto area.
And the police officer told you that your bank accounts could be unfrozen once you informed them that you left Ottawa. Is that fair?
That's what he stated.
And did you check at the time that your bank accounts had in fact been frozen?
I was already informed prior to his call by my husband.
So your husband called you to let you know that he was not able to access your joint bank accounts?
His business account, which had my name on it to pay for expenses, his and my joint household expense account, as well as my personal bank accounts, were all frozen. He informed me at approximately 8 a.m., could be sooner than that, and I got the call at 10:04 by the person claiming to be from the Royal Bank.
So they claimed to be from the Royal Bank, but you believe that they were a police officer? Am I getting that right?
Now I believe they were a police officer because I called the number afterwards. A few
called the
months
number
later,
afterwards?
not directly, a few months later.
So they left you a telephone number to call back at?
No, I screenshotted the message when they called. I screenshotted their phone number.
And you called them back later, and then how did they identify themselves when you called back later?
I'd have to recall the number. Would you like me to try?
No, I can't ask you to try that now. I'm just asking, how do you know that when you called back a few months later that they were a police officer?
Because they had no connection with the Royal Bank.
When you spoke to them a few months later?
I did not speak to them. I called them back and got a message machine. It stated their name and no association with the Royal Bank.
So it was not, for example, a corporate voicemail where the person would answer, "I'm so-and-so at the Royal Bank of Canada at this branch."
You're correct.
Okay. And you said that your bank accounts were frozen for a period of time, but you said you don't recall for how long because your husband manages the banking. Is that fair?
That's fair, yeah. He dealt more with that. I was dealing with, of course, other situations, other people not having money, trying to help truckers get home. The freezing of the bank accounts created a larger problem than solving the problem.
Okay. And in terms of the length of the problem, do you know, can you provide your best estimate of whether your bank accounts were frozen for a period of days or whether it was a period of weeks after February 17th?
I can't nail down a time for that. I know it was a very long time that I did not have access to funds, or it felt that way.
And do you know that because by March 1st, you had a mortgage payment due that you weren't able to make?
That's right. A friend went and made that mortgage payment for us. They went and deposited the money for us. So that would be correct.
Okay. And so can you just elaborate for me how, on a personal basis, the freezing of the bank accounts affected you with respect to your personal bank accounts, other than the payment of your mortgage?
Other than the $100 that was gifted to me by another participant, I couldn't put fuel in my pickup truck. I lived 9 hours from Ottawa, so I couldn't get home. I couldn't pay for my husband's diabetic medication. We were looking for solutions to that because the money we had to decide what that was going to pay for. The one unfrozen bank account, which wasn't a main bank account. That's not where we put all our expense money. So my expenses are now he's trying to cover his expenses. He's trying to cover his business expenses. He's trying to cover everything out of a very small account that's just meant for him to do with, buy groceries or food in the US. Our lifestyle is a little different, and it's very hard for people to understand that do not truck. There is usually a joint account to pay things that either husband or wife can do because we never know when we'll be home. My estimate time away is approximately 289 days a year, equivalent to 4.5 trips around the earth in a year. So we need to work together to make sure bills are paid.
So if I can summarize, your access to the joint bank account that you have with your husband is essential to manage your household finances because of the time that you spend away from home.
That's correct.
And the only bank account that you had access to was the personal bank account of your husband's that was not frozen.
I did not have access to that. That is his personal bank account. So he had access to money on the road. I was in Ottawa 9 hours from my home, and I had access to nothing.
Can you, I asked you about your experience personally with respect to the freezing of your personal bank.
You're well over your time, so you're going to have to wrap up, please.
Okay, so this is going to be my last question, and I apologize, Commissioner. Can you just elaborate on how it affected your business to have your business account frozen?
How it affected our business?
Correct.
We ended up having people, we actually, I believe, deferred the payment a month. We had to call and defer the payment.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. These are my questions. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Eva Krajewska for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Mr. Wilson, just briefly, were you still on the ground in Ottawa when the financial institution freezing orders started to come into effect?
Yes, just to be clear, there was 3 instances related to freezing that I was dealing with, well, 4, and no random order just off the top of my head. The earliest one was a threat of an interpleader application by TD Bank through their external counsel. The next one was the ex parte order obtained by the Attorney General of Ontario under the Criminal Code declaring the donations proceeds of crime. Then the next was a freeze order of sorts, and then we had the emergency measures, the financial measures, and then after that we had the Mariva injunction.
Okay, I just want to ask you about the financial measures under the Emergencies Act.
Yes.
Can you just, did people come to you from the Freedom Convoy and ask you for advice with respect to the orders and relate to you how they were affecting them? And can you just provide if they did, could you just provide a summary of how the orders were affecting them if they came to you to speak to you about that?
Every one of them did in real time, and they were finding out at different times. I still remember one of them coming to me and saying, I just got a phone call from my wife. She's at the supermarket. She was with the kids. Grocery cart was full. She went to pay with the debit card. It didn't work. There's a lineup of people. What's going on? Because now the conveyor's full with the next person's groceries. And then she tried her Visa card and her second credit card, and none of it worked. And she had to leave the store in great embarrassment and phoned her spouse and said, what is going on? We had other people that were trying to put gas in their vehicles and couldn't. There was more than one instance where people needed to get prescriptions filled, could not. And then subsequent to that, as we worked to get the freezes lifted and reached out to the bank, we developed this template email to write to the bank, to ask the bank to respond to us as lawyers, Ms. Chipiak and I. Then we have received reports since, and to very recently, that a number of these people, even though their bank accounts were unfrozen, sorry, Mr. Commissioner, I just realized how fast I was speaking. After their accounts were frozen, have been denied credit applications, and I have explained to my clients and others who contacted me that the Canadian Bankers Association representative who testified before the House Committee said that each of these persons will have their accounts, their names marked, flagged for life.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Marazzo, my name is Eva Krajewska, and I'm counsel for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I want to ask you a few questions with respect to the emergencies orders. After the Federal Emergencies Act was invoked, were any of your personal or corporate bank accounts frozen?
Yes, all of my bank accounts, my joint bank accounts with my former spouse, were all affected. My credit card that was on file with my son's pharmacy were suspended. My former spouse, her credit rating was dropped 109 points. Yes, so everything was frozen. I had access to no money other than cash.
And so these were all your personal accounts, and not just ones that you hold individually, but also ones that you hold jointly with your
Yes.
child and your former spouse?
Yes, they were joint accounts were frozen, as well as my my ex-wife's, my first wife's financial institution reached out and cautioned her that potentially her accounts were going to also be frozen, and I haven't been with her in over a decade.
And Mr. Marazzo, for how long were your bank accounts frozen?
During the entire time of the Emergency Act.
So until the Emergencies Act was revoked?
Yes. And my, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that luckily we had cash in the house because my son's heart medication, we couldn't purchase it. My account had been frozen. And if we didn't have cash, he wouldn't have been able to get his heart medication. He had a month and a half previous had myocarditis and was on some pretty intense heart medication.
And were you given any information either from the bank or from the police as to how your bank accounts could be reopened?
I was never notified that my bank accounts had been frozen, and I was never notified that they would be, and I was never notified that they were reinstated at no time.
So did you just find out that they were frozen because you could no longer use your cards?
Could no longer access any of our financial assets at all.
And how did you find out that your bank accounts and assets were unfrozen? Was it just because you were able to use them again?
We just continued it. Once we discovered it, we would check every couple hours to see if we had access to our own money.
Were you able to access your online banking?
Just to get in, you could log in, but there was a message on it that said access to your financial whatever was denied.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Marazzo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.